My name is Joan Froggatt, and I am 65 years old. I am a widow and live in a small, quiet neighborhood in Indiana. Life here is calm, and I have grown used to the silence that comes when children leave home and the years move forward. For almost 25 years, I have worked as an office manager at a law firm. My days were filled with schedules, paperwork, and making sure things at work ran smoothly. It was not glamorous, but it was steady, and it helped me raise my two children, Kelly and Henry. Kelly is 32 now, and Henry is 29. Raising them has been my greatest purpose. I worked long hours, saved carefully, and made sure that they never had to go through the same struggles I faced growing up. Every decision I made was for them, whether it was taking on extra shifts, skipping vacations, or saying no to things I wanted so they could have what they needed. Seeing them happy was always enough for me. Last Saturday, something happened that shook me more deeply than I thought possible. It began with something as small as an email. I was drinking my morning coffee when I saw it in my inbox. There was no subject line, just the word Kelly. My heart lifted. I smiled as I clicked it open, thinking maybe it was a quick update or even a loving message as our wedding approached. A few weeks earlier, we had spoken at length about her big day. She had been so excited, and I had been proud to help. I gave her $33,000 so she could book the venue, hire the photographer she had dreamed of, and secure the florist she had admired since her college days. But when I opened the email, my smile faded. It started with a single word: Mom. Not dear Mom, not even a kind phrase, just the label of who I am. The tone felt different before I even read further. Kelly explained that she and her fiancé, Peter, along with his family, had finished the wedding guest list. After a lot of thought, they had decided it was best if I did not attend the ceremony in Berkeley in person. Instead, I could watch it online through a live stream. She wrote that Peter's mother was very particular about the number of guests and wanted to keep the event small and intimate. At the end of her note came a line that felt like someone pressing on an open wound. If you want to be part of it, you can join through the Google Meet link. It should feel just like being there. Just like being there. Those words stung. I sat there staring at the screen. My coffee grew cold beside me. I did not cry, and my hands did not shake. Instead, something inside me shifted quietly, almost like the ground had cracked beneath my feet, but I was still standing. I did not write a long response. I did not beg or argue. Instead, I replied with only 4 words: Sure. Enjoy your big day. That was it. No warmth, no anger. Only silence that carried its own meaning. I knew those 4 words would speak louder than shouting ever could. I did not want to fight with her, and I did not want to spend my energy on tears. I wanted clarity. I wanted the quiet truth of her choice to stand between us, plain and undeniable. In that moment, I realized something. Sometimes, silence carries the heaviest weight. I closed the laptop and stared at the blank screen for a moment. My coffee sat on the table, cold and untouched, but I forced myself to drink the last few sips anyway. Then I got dressed for work, like it was any other Saturday. Only it wasn't. That day was different. That day I stopped pretending that all the sacrifices I had made meant something to my daughter. That was the day my life quietly began to change. The drive to the office that morning was unusually quiet. Indiana's early spring air still carried a sharp chill, but I hardly noticed it. My mind was too loud. The same question kept circling again and again. How did we get here? I have worked at Caldwell Walker Law for 19 years. The job isn't exciting, but it's steady. And after my husband passed away suddenly, when Kelly and Henry were still teenagers, steady was all I wanted. I needed something I could count on, something that wouldn't disappear overnight. I remember standing once in front of our old washing machine, bills spread across the counter. I was trying to figure out how to pay for groceries and Kelly's college deposit at the same time. Back then, there wasn't a choice. I gave up weekends, picked up extra shifts, canceled vacations, and even skipped birthdays. I told myself, there will be time for me later. But the truth is, later never came. Every dollar I saved went to my children. When Kelly changed her major twice and needed more classes, I paid the fees. When she moved to Nevada for a job that barely lasted a year, I covered her apartment deposit and bought her plane ticket. When her heart broke at 27 after a bad breakup, I flew across the country just to hold her hand and make her tea in a kitchen that didn't even feel like home. Henry needed me too. When he wanted to buy a house with his fiancée, I co-signed the mortgage without hesitation. I even wrote the first $12,000 check to get them started. I never kept track of what I gave. I never thought of it as debt or repayment. That's what mothers are supposed to do, right? Give, and give some more. But after reading Kelly's email, something shifted in me. For the first time, I felt less like a mother and more like a transaction. Like I had been useful when money or support was needed, but now that stage of life was over. I had expired. It felt like I had a shelf life, and it had run out. When I finally arrived at the office, I tried to shake off the heaviness in my chest. I sat down at my desk, opened my planner, and reminded myself there was still work to do. Life doesn't stop, even when your heart feels broken. Not long after, my boss, Aaron, stopped by. Aaron has always been one of those rare men who notices things others overlook. He remembers birthdays. He remembers how you take your coffee. That morning, he asked if I was all right. His voice was calm but curious, like he could see the shadow behind my forced smile. I told him I was fine. The same lie I had been telling myself since I closed that email. But deep inside, I knew I wasn't fine. That day marked the start of something I couldn't yet name. The day I began to see that my life, my role, and even my family weren't what I had believed them to be. He noticed right away that something was wrong. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Aaron said, setting a hot latte from the cafe downstairs on my desk. He always remembered how I liked my coffee, and that small detail made me feel both seen and cared for. I wanted to tell him the truth. I wanted to say out loud, my daughter just disinvited me from her wedding. The words sat heavy in my chest, pressing against my throat. But instead of sharing, I forced a small smile and said I hadn't slept well the night before. He didn't push me for more, and that silence was its own kind of kindness. The coffee, the gesture, the way he didn't demand an explanation, it nearly undid me. My morning had been full of noise in my head, thoughts clashing and circling like storm clouds. But that small act reminded me that I was still here, that I still mattered, even if the world around me seemed to suggest otherwise. Around lunchtime, my phone buzzed on my desk. The screen lit up with a name I didn't want to see. Kelly. My daughter. Her name looked too bright, almost like a spotlight shining into a place I wanted to keep dark. I ignored it the first time. But then came more. A second call. A third. Then voicemails and texts. "Mom, please answer. We need to talk. This isn't funny." I didn't listen to a single voicemail. Not yet. I left them sitting there, lined up like tiny grenades I refused to touch. Instead, I sipped my latte and sat quietly. For once in my life, I didn't jump to respond. I didn't rush to fix the problem. A thought formed in my mind, soft at first, then stronger with every passing minute. Maybe it was time to stop always being the one who answered. Maybe it was time to stop playing a role in someone else's story when they wouldn't even let me stand on the stage. That afternoon, as the office quieted down, I made a decision. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. That had never been my way. Instead, I was going to do something far more powerful. I was going to act. When the workday ended, I didn't drive home like usual. Instead, I turned left and headed toward First Federal Bank, just a few blocks from the office. The parking lot was half empty, the way it often was in the middle of the week. I parked, walked inside, and was greeted instantly by a familiar face. "Mrs. Froggatt," Gary, the branch manager, said warmly as he stood up to shake my hand. He had been helping me with financial matters for years, from setting up college funds for Kelly and Henry to adjusting my retirement accounts after my husband passed. He always greeted me by name, always remembered the details. "What can I do for you today?" he asked. I sat down across from him, placing my purse on the floor beside me. My voice came out calm, almost too calm. "I need to cancel a wire transfer." Gary blinked. "The one to the Napa venue?" "Yes," I said simply. "That one." He hesitated, typing something into his computer. There may be a cancellation fee depending on the timing, but may I ask why? The circumstances have changed, I replied, keeping my tone even. I didn't feel the need to explain any further. After a moment, he looked back at the screen. You're in luck. It hasn't processed yet. Just in time. He paused, then met my eyes. Are you sure, Mrs. Froggatt? $60,000 is a significant amount. I nodded. I'm sure. 60,000. That was the amount I had promised to send next, on top of the 33,000 I had already given. Money that had once felt like an investment in love and family now felt like a price tag attached to my worth. And I was done paying it. $90,000. That was the total I had promised for a wedding I wasn't even allowed to attend. When I signed the forms at the bank to cancel the transfer, I felt no hesitation, no second thoughts. It was as if something inside me had finally gone still. The decision was made, and with that, a new part of me quietly opened. By the time I drove home, the silence was broken by my phone buzzing again and again. 15 missed calls from Kelly. 2 from Henry. 1 voicemail from Kelly simply said, "Mom, please don't do this." I didn't listen to the rest. I just turned off the phone, set it on the counter, and let the house be quiet. In the kitchen, my eyes landed on a bottle of red wine I had been saving for Thanksgiving the year before. I had planned to open it when Kelly came home to visit, but she had canceled last minute, saying work got in the way. That bottle had sat untouched ever since. I opened it now, poured myself a glass, and carried it out onto the porch. The evening was calm. The sky was streaked with fading light, the kind of soft orange and pink that makes everything look gentle for a little while. Birds called to one another in the trees, and somewhere down the street, a neighbor's dog barked. The ordinary sounds of life surrounded me, but inside, I felt the weight of years pressing forward. And then the memories came. They arrived in waves I couldn't stop, each one sharper than the last. I thought about all the birthdays I had planned alone, decorating cakes and wrapping presents by myself, while pretending it didn't matter that their father wasn't there. I thought of the holiday dinners where I set too many plates, always hoping the phone would ring, always waiting for a call that never came. I remembered the sacrifices no one else seemed to notice, the new shoes I never bought, the old car I drove for 15 years, the vacations I postponed year after year, promising myself there would be time later. And then my thoughts turned to Peter's mother. A woman who barely knew Kelly. A woman whose opinion somehow carried more weight than mine, though I had carried Kelly through every hard season of her life. I had been there when she was sick, when she failed, when she broke down in tears at midnight. I had stitched her life together piece by piece, and now I was being written out of the story. I thought of that email. The way Kelly ended it with LOL, as if telling your mother to watch her only daughter's wedding on a screen was some kind of joke. And then, for the first time in a long time, I thought about myself, not as a mother, not as a widow, but simply as a woman. What did I want? The answer rose quietly, like something I had always known. I wanted peace. I wanted dignity. I wanted a life that wasn't built around being useful to people who only called when they needed something. Later that night, around 9 o'clock, the doorbell rang. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of me. When I opened the door, there was Henry. He was still in his office clothes, his tie loosened, his sleeves rolled up. He looked tired, uneasy, holding his phone in one hand like it was both a shield and a burden. "Mom," he said, stepping inside before I could say anything. His voice was strained, but soft. "Why aren't you answering your phone? Kelly's freaking out." And just like that, the silence I had built for myself began to shift. I shut the door calmly behind Henry and gave him a steady look. "Hello to you, too," I said, my voice flat but controlled. He let out a long sigh and began pacing across the living room like a man with too many thoughts in his head. "She says you're not coming to the wedding now, that you're being difficult." I couldn't help but laugh, though there was no humor in it. Difficult? For not attending a wedding I was uninvited from? That's rich. Henry shifted on his feet, avoiding my eyes. "Peter's parents are paying for most of it, Mom. You know how traditional they are." I raised an eyebrow. Traditional? I already paid $33,000. And I was about to send 60,000 more. That's not tradition, Henry. That's a business deal. His head snapped up. He froze like he hadn't heard me right. Wait, you were sending another 50? I took a sip of my wine and nodded. Was. Not anymore. Color drained from his face. Mom, they're counting on that money. The venue, the food, Not my problem anymore. I cut in, keeping my tone even. His voice rose, sharper now. Of course it's your problem. She's your daughter. And I'm her mother, I said quietly but firmly. A mother who is told to stay home and watch her daughter's wedding through a screen. Do you understand what that feels like? Henry dragged his hands through his hair, pacing again. His shoulders were tight, his face flushed with frustration. You always make everything about yourself, he snapped. And just like that, something in me broke loose. A wall I had been holding up for decades finally cracked, and the truth came pouring out. Get out of my house. He stopped, blinking at me. What? You heard me, Henry. Get out. Mom. No. I interrupted, my voice steady but soft, the kind of softness that comes when you've already made up your mind. I've given everything I had. Every dollar, every ounce of energy, every piece of myself. And now I'm done. I will not be painted as the villain in a story I wrote with love. For a moment, Henry just stood there, caught between anger and disbelief. Then, without another word, he turned, walked to the door, and left. The door closed behind him with a soft click, but to me, it sounded louder than any slam. I stood in the middle of my living room, heart pounding in my chest. And then something unexpected happened. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel regret. I felt free. The next morning, I woke up to the shrill buzz of my phone. 56 missed calls. A flood of messages from Kelly filled the screen. At first, the words were sharp, laced with guilt and blame. Mom, we need to talk. Why are you doing this? This is childish. I scrolled further, and the tone had shifted. The panic was starting to bleed through. The venue just called. The payment didn't go through. I set the phone down on the table. For years, I had been the one holding everything together. I had been the safety net, the problem solver, the person who filled every gap. But now, for the first time, the gaps were no longer mine to fill. I sat back, poured myself another cup of coffee, and let the quiet of the morning wash over me. For the first time in decades, it wasn't my problem. The messages from Kelly came one after another, each one more desperate than the last. We're going to lose everything if we don't pay by tomorrow. Peter's parents are furious. They said this proves they were right about you. Then, at 4:17 in the morning, another. I don't understand why you're doing this to me. I sat in the kitchen with my coffee, the steam rising into the early quiet. I smiled faintly, not out of joy, but because of the truth hidden in her words. Of course, she didn't understand. How could she? Kelly had grown up wrapped in my sacrifices, so tightly she never noticed them. She never questioned where her comfort came from, where the safety and stability were born. She just assumed it would always be there. She assumed I would always be there. But not this time. Later that morning, I sat at my desk reviewing contracts, trying to focus on the details. Then, a new email popped up in my personal inbox. The subject line read, "Please don't ruin my wedding." I hesitated, then clicked it open. "Mom," she wrote. "I know you're upset about the live stream situation, but this is extreme. We've already lost the venue deposit, and if we don't pay the remaining balance by end of day London time, the caterer walks. Peter's parents are beyond upset. They're saying this proves you can't be reasoned with. Please don't do this. We can talk about you attending the ceremony, but we need the funds first." I read it twice. There it was, clear as day. They weren't apologizing. They weren't reflecting. They were negotiating. As if my presence at my own daughter's wedding was a bargaining chip. As if being her mother could be bartered, bought, or sold, depending on how generous I felt with my bank account. I closed the email without replying. My hands didn't shake. My eyes didn't water. I simply turned back to my work. Around noon, Aaron stopped by my desk. He leaned against the doorway with his easy smile, holding his jacket in one hand. "Lunch?" he asked. "That new Italian place just opened." Normally, I would have said no. For years, I had been the one who stayed at her desk, who skipped lunches out, who believed there was always work to be done. But something in me had shifted over the last 12 hours. Maybe it was the silence after the storm. Maybe it was the clarity that comes when you finally stop begging for someone else's approval. Maybe I just needed to sit in a place where no one demanded anything of me. So I nodded. I'd like that. Over steaming plates of pasta, Aaron talked about his grandkids. He described how exhausting it was to chase after them, but how beautiful it felt to see their laughter fill a room. I listened quietly, sipping water, twirling my fork through spaghetti, and letting the warmth of normal conversations settle into me. For the first time in a long while, I felt like a person again, not a bank account, not a background character, not a tool to be used and set aside. Just a woman, sitting across from someone who cared enough to notice when she looked tired. And in that moment, I realized something. My life didn't have to revolve around people who only valued me when I was useful to them. I had the power to choose peace. Aaron's eyes were gentle as he looked across the table at me. "Forgive me, Joanne," he said softly, "but you seem lighter today. Different." I surprised myself with what came next. I told him everything. I told him about Kelly's email, about being asked to watch my own daughter's wedding through a screen, about the money I had already given, and about the transfer I had canceled. I spoke until the words stopped, until there was nothing left to explain. He didn't interrupt. He didn't judge. He didn't offer quick fixes or empty advice. When I finished, he simply leaned forward, his voice calm but steady. Sometimes the hardest part of love is setting boundaries, especially with the people we've given the most to. He reached across the table and gave my hand a brief squeeze. "I think you did the right thing." And for the first time in a very long time, I believed that. When I returned to my desk, my phone was still buzzing, more calls, more texts, more pleas. But I didn't answer. I didn't feel the need to anymore. My silence was its own response, and it spoke louder than any words I could have written. That evening, when I pulled into my driveway, the sun was dipping low, painting the sky in fading pinks and purples. The porch light clicked on automatically, casting a soft glow across the front steps. For a moment, everything looked calm, almost peaceful. But then I saw someone sitting there, waiting. As I walked closer, I recognized her, Teresa. She stood quickly, brushing at her coat as if trying to smooth away nerves. Teresa had been Kelly's best friend since 6th grade. She had spent countless weekends in our home, baking cookies with Kelly in the kitchen, watching movies sprawled across the living room floor, giggling in sleeping bags until dawn. She had been like another daughter once, but it had been years since I had last seen her. "Mrs. Froggatt," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of both respect and hesitation. "I'm sorry to drop by like this." "It's fine," I replied, unlocking the door. "Would you like some tea?" She nodded, following me into the house. Her eyes lingered on the walls, scanning the familiar photos and corners, as if the echoes of childhood laughter still lived there. I filled the kettle with water and set it on the stove. "Kelly sent you?" I finally asked. Teresa didn't answer right away. She stared at the counter, then said, "She's a mess. They lost the venue. The florist dropped out. Peter's parents are threatening to cancel the wedding altogether." I placed 2 mugs on the counter, my face calm, my hands steady. I didn't reply. "She's panicking," Teresa continued. "She knows she messed up. She just doesn't know how to fix it." I turned, meeting her eyes. "And is that why you're here? To fix it for her?" Teresa shook her head. "No. I'm here to ask you something." She took a breath. "Is there anything Kelly can say, or do, that would change your mind?" Her question hung in the air, heavier than the steam rising from the kettle. Was there? Could any apology undo the sting of being excluded? Could words erase the feeling of being treated like a bank account instead of a mother? Could a promise for the future heal the wound of being told I wasn't welcome unless my money was? I let the question circle in my head, but I didn't rush to answer. Some silences carry more truth than words ever could. I looked at Teresa sitting across from me. She was still so young, still full of hope, still carrying that belief that love could fix anything. I shook my head gently. "No," I said quietly. "There isn't." Her shoulders dropped, as if the answer weighed on her. "Not even if she apologizes?" she asked, her voice soft, almost pleading. I handed her the warm mug of tea and met her eyes. "Words are easy, Teresa. Especially when people are desperate. But the people who truly love you, they don't wait until you cut them off to finally see you. They don't wait until everything is falling apart to realize what you mean to them." Teresa looked down into her tea, swirling it slowly as steam curled up between us. She nodded, understanding in her own quiet way. "I get it," she whispered. "Even if she doesn't." She hesitated, then added, "I'm sorry, Mrs. Froggatt." "You don't need to be," I replied softly. We stood in silence for a while, two women from very different generations sharing one hard truth. Love has limits. Sometimes, the only way to truly be seen is to step back. Sometimes, the only way to protect yourself is to walk away. Teresa didn't stay long. She didn't argue. She didn't try to convince me. She simply thanked me, hugged me with surprising tenderness, and then walked back out into the cool night air. I watched her go, and then I closed the door. Not just on her, but on a version of myself I had carried for too many years. The version of me that believed love meant endless sacrifice, that believed giving more would finally be enough. The wedding never happened as they had dreamed. They scrambled for another venue, but everything was either booked or far too expensive without the money I had once promised. According to Henry, they ended up having a small backyard ceremony a few weeks later. Just a handful of relatives, Peter's parents, and a few close friends. I wasn't invited. And this time, I didn't need to be. In the weeks that followed, Kelly sent me one more email. It was long, emotional, and tangled with half apologies and half excuses. She wanted to explain, to soften the sharp edges of what she had done. I read it once, slowly, then clicked archive. I didn't reply. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I was simply finished. There's a strange kind of peace that comes with letting go, not in rage, not in bitterness, but in clarity. For the first time in decades, I woke up without wondering who needed something from me. I didn't brace myself for another guilt trip disguised as love. I didn't measure my worth in what I could give away. I made a new rule for myself. If my presence is negotiable, then so is my effort. These days, I go to work and come home with enough energy left to live my own life. I read novels that had been gathering dust on my shelves. I signed up for a pottery class and let my hands learn something new. I have dinner with friends who see me, not my bank account, not my sacrifices, just me. And through all this, I've learned something I wish I had known long ago. You don't have to burn yourself down to keep others warm. Sometimes the strongest, purest kind of love is the one you finally give to yourself.